Good evening. This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined this week by former United player Phil Marsh to talk over an eventful, emotional week at Manchester United. If you're watching live on YouTube, if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video, if you can comment and join in the conversation, even if you're watching on the replay, because we comment on the replay comments. And if you're listening back on the audio podcast, if you can subscribe and leave a positive review on the platform that you're listening on, we would really appreciate it. Phil, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, all good, Wayne. Just finished the school term for me, so good to have a little bit of a week off now and sort of have a bit of relax. It's always a long term, the first one, so glad to get that out of the way and have a little bit of a break. But yeah, everything's all good, mate. As I say, looking forward to the derby game this weekend. Although I'm not feeling massively confident after the recent performances, but we've seen crazy things happen in them games in previous years, so I'm always quietly confident that we can get a result.
Yeah, we'll get to that in due course. Obviously, we've got to start off by paying tribute again, as we did on Monday, but such a seismic figure that we've got to continue the conversation about Sir Bobby Charlton and lead with that. So many tributes paid this week. One of those what's brought the whole city together, Manchester City legends. Pep Guardiola saying something really classy earlier where he was talking, Mike Summerby coming down to Old Trafford and paying his respects. And, obviously, United legends throughout the world really paying their respects to Bobby, Sir Bobby. His contribution, Phil, I think it's one of those figures that you knew was a gargantuan contribution to United. And everyone's always lived with that. We as fans, you as players, live with that throughout your entire life, really. And it's only since he's passed, and it's like you can only liken it to like the Queen dying or something like that. As far as Manchester United are concerned, it's up there in comparison because it's been a week-long mourning, really. The mourning will continue, but it's certainly been a week-long up until now. And I've been at Old Trafford throughout the week on various days and seen the different stages, and like the flowers in front of the statue continue to grow, the pictures continue to pile, the tributes from all clubs are there. You go down to the West Stand, Stretford End, where the condolence books are, the 4 condolence books for the general public, and obviously there's other books as well. And the queues that have been there for people to sign and leave a tribute. We went down yesterday with my nephew to pay a few words, and it's no less sad, really. There's still people genuinely bereft, genuinely sad. And I was with someone yesterday, and they were a City fan actually, and we were talking about it, and she said that it felt like everyone's granddad had died. And it kind of feels, it was a really good summary, really, of that, because it's brought everyone together, and the size of his achievements. You now think about them in perspective. What he lived through, what he came through, what he achieved, and for a long time he was a record appearance holder. For a long time he was a record goal scorer for United. For a long time he was the most successful player in the club's history. It was only the 90s when we had that dominating period of success, when we started to add those league titles, and that Bobby's record was overtaken in terms of medals, but in terms of contribution, a player who survived through Munich, 10 years later scored 2 goals in the European Cup final, and really is, if a player is the story of Manchester United, is Bobby Charlton, and it's no less sad than it was a week ago. It's tragic, really. He's been ill for a long time, but it's one of those where people talk about someone's illness, and particularly that kind of illness. Is it a blessing that they're gone, that they don't have to suffer? But really, we're still mourning in the same way, really. And I mean, how have you dealt with it, Phil? Because I mean, it is an emotional one. How have you dealt with it since you heard? Because obviously it's sad to hear, but you were someone who's been around him, maybe not had loads of personal interactions with him, but you've been there. You've sort of lived in that, I guess, a shadow, really. This idea that you've got to live up to something, that standard, the story that he set, impossible to match, but they're the footsteps that you're following, really. How have you dealt with the last week?
Yeah, I mean, I heard the news last Saturday when it broke. I'd just finished our game actually that I'd been involved with, and it was a massive shock, really. First and foremost, he obviously epitomised everything that Manchester United stands for, from my point of view, and as you just touched on there, what he went through with the sort of Munich disaster, and to come through that and sort of leave a legacy behind, with everything that you'd want really as a player, as a person, the way he was with everybody who he met. As I said to you, before we started the pod, I didn't really have many sort of interactions with Bobby on a personal level, but I did meet him a couple of times in and around the club, and to sort of be in his presence and just to speak to him. He was always really encouraging to all the younger players, always spoke really well. And, he was somebody who was massively respected by all, really, and not just at Manchester United. It's a massive loss for football. And you've seen that with the amount of tributes that people are paying, not just from, people and clubs in England, worldwide. Bobby Charlton, was a huge name and somebody who everybody knew and sort of admired his story really, and what he went through, and how he was portrayed by everybody because of the man he was. I think it's for Manchester United it's a huge loss. I think he was somebody who was a massive figure still, attended all the games, was somebody who I'm sure still, give the club a lot from the point of view of speaking to young players and expectations, and still had that sort of real drive and desire to sort of take the club forward, in a way that at the moment we're sort of going through a bit of a tough period, and it's one of them kind of reality checks now for the club to sort of look and sort of hopefully see that somebody who's been such an iconic figure at the club has now gone. We need to sort of start doing more as a club to sort of honour him and make him proud of what the club is all about. So I'm hoping that obviously there's all the tributes coming in, which is rightly so, but I think the club now needs to do him a good favour and try and start getting things right on and off the pitch to sort of make things right. And as we say, the fans have been calling for things to be improved on and off the pitch for a long time, and sort of this just makes it hit home a little bit more for me with when you look back at some of the previous teams that we've had and some of the sort of history and the sort of players that we've had to where we are in this present day. It sort of makes you sort of question sometimes what football's really about.
It's especially United, it's a family club, and people think that can't be the case because it's such a big club, and they, especially if you're not locally connected to it, and I don't mean that as a judgment on people who aren't local, because you can have a connection anywhere you are in the world, but I think if you're not that close, you don't always see the fact that it can be a family club, and it is a family club in the way that people know each other. That that's something that was Sir Matt, it was Sir Alex. These were the men who made it a point of knowing every employee's name to make sure that they knew everyone, to know their business and everything like that. So when you've seen the tributes this week, even from Phil said something, that you've not had that many interactions with him, but it's a loss that you feel because of the role that he did play in your life, and certainly mine as a supporter. I never met him, but it's just it's so sad. But being privileged this week to sort of have people acknowledge my tributes to him. Really, that they're only tributes when you're saying something. But I feel really privileged to have played a tiny little part in that. Like I was asked to talk on Talk Sport. I posted a few things on Twitter, and people seem to resonate with the information, because sometimes some of the information isn't always available. They'll look at Wikipedia, but sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper. And the club have put out a podcast today. So go and listen to it after this one, of course. Don't listen to it right now. Listen to me and Phil. But for the first couple of minutes, I was very, very honoured to write the script for the opening of that podcast. So I've listened to it. I've listened to it all, obviously. Hopefully, I did it justice. But yeah, it was a privilege to be involved in paying a tribute to, which is the greatest story ever told in football. It's going to be an emotional one on Sunday, and it was an emotional one on Tuesday, and it was for the players against Sheffield United as well. So, I mean, there was some. When I did the TalkSport thing on Saturday, there was a guy on before me, and he was so critical of the team's performance. He was saying they should have gone out there and played for Sir Bobby. And I thought, well, if there's a group of players who don't really connect with Bobby, it might be this group, and not because of anything malicious or anything like they're unfamiliar with him or anything. It's just because, like, over that past couple of years where he's not been attending frequently and he's been poorly, that he's not been present. So a lot of these players haven't been there, and he won't affect them in the same way. And even the ones who did know him, like Marcus and players like that it was so close to kickoff that there's no. I'm not saying it's an excuse for a poor performance. I'm not saying it's a reason for a good performance. It's like, what do you do? How do you feel in that moment? You're not going to judge someone. You're not going to tell them to go out and be a certain way, because this is fairly unprecedented. The only thing I can think of that's fairly close is in recent times would be Sir Matt Busby dying in '94, and the players had a couple of days to sort of come to terms with that. And that was a team who were in an unbeaten run. They were very successful. They had a lot of strong characters, and they put out a performance where they only won narrowly 1-0 against Everton, and the atmosphere was unbelievable in that game. And the atmosphere was supercharged again against Copenhagen on Tuesday night, Phil. We'll talk about that one. 1-0, it wasn't a convincing performance, but again, United haven't been in convincing form. There are reasons that are far beyond not wanting to play well for Bobby Charlton, which I think is not fair on the players at all. There's no balance in that side for a start. Reguilon was back, so that for once it did look like a bit of balance, but it was very flat. Again, Copenhagen came to Old Trafford, not the first and probably not going to be the last team. I wish they were the last team this season to say that I can say outplayed United at Old Trafford. Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think there's going to be one on Sunday that we're going to see. But, United did well to sort of hold through that. They scored a goal in the second half. We've got to be realistic. They're not going to be Champions League contenders this season. It's a struggle to get out of that group, and where we are is where we are, and you've seen that in the level of the performances. Where we are, I'm talking about with the injury crisis that we've got. This is what you're seeing with the team, unfortunately, and players in poor form like Marcus and a couple of others as well. But yeah, 1-0. Maguire, who's been much maligned, scores the winner. Onana, who's been much maligned, saves a penalty. McTominay, who's been much maligned, gives the penalty away. Could have been a deadly triumvirate of errors, really, of much maligned players, not really helping United out. But in the end, Onana saves the penalty and United win the game. What did you make of what you saw on Tuesday night? Because it's quite a difficult one to sort of get your head around, really.
Yeah, it was. I think personally for me, I was very underwhelmed with the first 45 minutes. Just thought we looked really flat. Didn't really sort of create any real clear-cut chances. I thought they looked the more dangerous team on the counter-attack, and only for a bit of luck and a couple of good saves by the goalkeeper, we sort of was still in the game. I think second half, especially when he made a couple of changes, we looked a lot more assertive and started to create a little bit more. I thought Eriksen, when he came on, gave us that little bit of control in the midfield, and obviously he had a great hand in the Maguire goal with a good cross. But yeah, I think it was just you're happy to win. I think that was a massive game for us. We needed to win that game in order to stay in the race to get out of the group. I think second. I did say this a few weeks ago, saying I think it'd be between ourselves and Galatasaray for second place. I think that game, if we'd have lost that or if we'd have drew that the other night, that would have been curtains. So we was happy to take the 3 points. However, I think the performances and sort of individuals' performances need to be a lot better. You can dissect it as much as you want and look at injuries and players not having match fitness and out of form, but ultimately, we're sort of at a stage in the season now where we should be starting to hit a little bit of consistency and a little bit of form, and players should be getting the match fitness up to a level where they're putting in performances regularly and consistently, and we're not quite seeing that. So I think that is why we are where we are at the moment. And for me, it feels as though we're sort of just getting away with it a little bit. The Sheffield United game for me was another example of that, where for me, I watched that game, I thought Sheffield United were the best team in terms of the way they played. They created more chances, they looked more lively, they looked fitter, and we was a little bit flat again and didn't really seem to be at the races, and it was sort of a bit of individual brilliance from Dalot really to sort of seal that game for us. But yeah, it's just a little bit frustrating. I think we can look at players. You mentioned Rashford there. He's definitely out of form. I think his confidence is rock bottom at the moment. Again, you can see it when he goes through on goal. He just doesn't look like he's got that glint in his eye that he had last season, where every time he went through last year, he was just pulling the trigger and scoring at free will. Whereas now, I think he's overthinking things. I think he's snatching at things. His touch is letting him down. He's crossing when he should be shooting and shooting when he should be crossing. And for me, until them players, your Marcus Rashfords and your Højlunds start hitting the ground running more often and putting in better performances, I think we are really going to struggle, because other than McTominay, the goals haven't been coming from any regular source. And in football, if you don't score goals, then inevitably you're going to be struggling.
Yeah, it's been a tough watch as well. Thing is, if we're going to try and be optimistic, you do sometimes need sparks of inspiration, don't you? And sometimes it can be moments. And when you are struggling, you've got to invest in hope in those moments. And the moment that we've got is Onana's penalty save at the end. Ira is a player who has been struggling, who has been under a lot of criticism by the press and some of the supporters as well. People wondering, have we downgraded from De Gea? And I've been among those critics. This podcast, we've all voiced our concern about it. But obviously, we all want him to come good and be the goalkeeper that he looked like he could be at Ajax and at Inter Milan. And we've all sort of said, this is the highest profile single position in the world, goalkeeper at Manchester United. And he stepped up to the plate on Tuesday night when we needed him. Fantastic save. And United have a lifeline in the Champions League, and he has an opportunity to use this. And it's a difficult one, because you can't, if he's an outfield player, you would say use a moment like this to sort of galvanise and go on. But outfield players don't make penalty saves, and goalkeepers are still in the position where they're sometimes only as good as the defence in front of them. So it is difficult for him. But hopefully, if there is any lack of confidence in there, it might have been shaken off. Are you with me on this one? Are you sharing that hope that this is a turning point for him?
Yeah, it was a massive moment for him. I think in that second half, he made some really good saves. Especially, I think there was one early in the second half where he's pulled a cracking save off to his right hand side, which was going into the top corner. So that was a fantastic save, and as you say, to win the game so late on and for him to save that penalty with the last kick of the game after the mistakes that he's been making and sort of, all the criticism that he's been under, we're hoping that now will be, the little spark that he may need. And, you do need that sometimes. Players, can go through dips in form. And as a goalkeeper, if you make a mistake, 9 times out of 10, it's going to lead to a goal. So, for him, I think that was a massive moment. So we're hoping, all of us, as a club, that he can kick on from this now. He can take a little bit of positive energy and try and hopefully just cut out the mistakes, because I think generally he's been okay. The distribution is miles better. De Gea was never one that was great with his feet. I think he is quite comfortable with his passing, and his distribution is, generally quite good. I just think that some of the goals that he's let in have been really weak, and some of the mistakes he's made have been really poor, and obviously not what we was expecting. So for me, this is a fresh start for him. Hopefully now, fans get behind him. He's made a great save and, got us 3 points in the Champions League. So this hopefully will be the springboard for him to kick on, and hopefully the performances and, as you say, the back four in front of him will be back to its best as soon as possible to help him with that, because I do agree with you on that. I think sometimes as a goalkeeper you can be scrutinised and maybe unfairly sort of criticised due to stuff that wouldn't necessarily happen if you had a bit more quality in the back four or a little bit more experience or leadership, because I think with the amount of players that we've had coming in and out and the disjointedness of the back four because of injuries and suspensions and what have you, we haven't had that continuity in the back four, and we say this all the time about building relationships and playing as a unit and making sure that every player that's in that back four knows the jobs, and what your partner's doing, and when he's there you need to be in this position. And it doesn't happen when players are chopping and changing as much as we have been doing. So, yeah, that could have a massive impact on it when we do get sort of certain players back into the squad as well.
So we're not convincing, but neither are our opponents on Sunday in Manchester City. They've not had a great start to the season, really. And, for a team who won the treble last season, they've not really kicked on. And I think maybe this is, I guess it might be a natural consequence of what happens when you're so far in front of everyone else that and there's no, across Europe there's no competition for them, really. They are their own competition, and we saw it last season in the Premier League. They were so far in front of everyone else, and I'm talking like in terms of quality, that it took Arsenal mildly threatening them to sort of kick into first gear. Were they ever in first gear? Did they ever look completely brilliant last season? There were moments, but I think you looked at Pep Guardiola, and I think if you're looking at a Pep Guardiola ideal team, you're not looking at one with Erling Haaland in it, because he's not the kind of player who normally plays in a Guardiola side. So I think what he's done is he's compromised a little, and so you're not seeing the normal fluency. What you are seeing is a team that has got too much quality, so they're far in front of everyone else. And what happens when the playing standard is that weak across the board, when your squad is so stacked full of talent and the rest of the competition isn't, then it's difficult for that squad of players to motivate themselves, or you need an extra special manager. And United had that for a long time with Sir Alex Ferguson, and that's why they were able to maintain a high level I'm thinking after they won the treble, and then there were the 2 seasons after where against a very good Arsenal side, we won it by a large margin, and that's because of Alex Ferguson and Roy Keane on the pitch, sort of driving their standards, and you can tell the difference. First of all, the competition was better in those days, and second of all, there's just nothing there. The urgency isn't there because they know that they can win it at a canter, and you've seen that in their form this season. They were unconvincing against Forest at home in winning. They've lost to Wolves, they've lost to Arsenal, and they didn't look good in either of those games. Rodri's been a big miss when he's been suspended. They struggled to victory against Brighton. And yet you look at Haaland still scoring goals, but he doesn't look anywhere near as. I mean, look, he'll probably still score 40 odd this season, but he doesn't look anywhere near as frightening as he did last season. He'll probably score a couple, might even get an hat trick against us, Old Trafford on Sunday, but he doesn't look as menacing or as, like when we've watched Ronaldo and we've watched Messi for years and years one up each other, and so the next week one scored an hat trick, and then the next week one would score 4 amazing goals, or like someone would score an hat trick, and the next week someone would score the goal of the millennium or something like that. Those two players push themselves to reach greater heights, and then you see Jude Bellingham, and you see what an incredible impact he's having at Real Madrid, and you look at City, and it's like they're struggling to sort of, and this is the best team by a distance, best squad I should say, by a distance in Europe. They should really, they're odds on to win a treble again. They should be, because European football and the Premier League is still so weak and stacked in their favour. And it's them being their own worst enemy that's our best chance of getting a result on Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird. I think, obviously, as you said, I think you made some really good points there with coming off the back of winning the treble. I think naturally, that's the sort of pinnacle for any team. And once you've won that, naturally, I think, you sort of will see a little bit of a lull just because of the achievements that you've made in the previous season. I think for me, just looking at City this year, I think they've sort of lost a few massive players. If you look at last season, the sort of 2 or 3 big players, Gundogan, obviously he moved on. He's a massive loss. Obviously Grealish hasn't been playing a lot this season due to injury. I think he, was a big player last year and had a lot to do with, the amount of goals that Haaland was getting with some of the creativity in that final third. And the big one, obviously De Bruyne not being there. And, he's somebody who's, in terms of creation for Haaland, he would probably get, 15, 20 assists a season. So although they have still been getting results, and as you say, I don't think they've been put under massive amount of pressure by other clubs. Arsenal, there or thereabouts, Liverpool just sort of sneaking under the radar a little bit, and Tottenham starting as well as they have. But obviously knowing Tottenham of old and what they're about, I think City are quietly just going along and thinking, we don't really need to sort of kick on just yet because we're sort of still in and around it. But yeah, I think, for us, we're at a time now where I think it's not a bad time to play him. As you said, Rodri's been suspended for a few weeks, so he's been a massive miss. And they have been a little bit shaky. I think, against Brighton, they weren't as convincing as I was expecting. Certain players aren't hitting the heights of, what people would have expected again this year. So for us, we've just got to go about it and try and put in a good performance and just see where that takes us. The only issue I have got with obviously ourselves at the moment is that there's the lack of goals really, and sort of the lack of creativity and sort of penetration in the final third. I think for me, I heard at this point on TalkSport the other day about I think it was Akbar Mahal was on with somebody, and they were saying about we need someone like an Antonio Valencia who could, be putting balls in for Højlund, which I tend to agree with. I think, Højlund's the type of striker that's a bit more of a old school number 9, if you like, where, he wants balls coming into the box and he will attack things. He's not the biggest in the world, but I think he's somebody who, if you do put crosses in, he will try and get on the end of it. And he seems to have a lot of pace, and he's sort of, not being utilised for me in the best way at the moment, with sort of the way that we're setting up and the way that we're sort of playing and sort of looking to score goals in the final third. So that might be something that, comes with time. I know it's still early days with Højlund and trying to sort of build the relationships with the other lads out wide and stuff. But I just think in general now that, we don't mix our game up enough. I think we're quite one-dimensional, and teams can sort of figure us out, and we don't really seem to have that, identity of how we're setting up to play. And for me, when I used to go and watch United, I used to love just, expecting that, when I go and watch that, this ball's going to be getting put into the box, Van Nistelrooy is going to be getting on the end of him, Beckham's going to get half a yard and just whip a ball in from anywhere, and Giggs is going to be beating his man and standing balls up to the back post. But, I do understand the game has changed and there's different sort of ways now that managers like to play. But again, I just think that sometimes, what's wrong with getting down the line and whipping a ball in and getting your centre forward to try and get at the end of it? Because that ball and that way of playing will always ask questions of any defence, any goalkeeper. And, it's been proven over the years that kind of, play is successful.
Yeah, and I think you're right, actually. I'm looking at you're saying United are fairly predictable, and I was thinking, how do they change it up? And maybe the idea is Rashford on the right and Garnacho on the left. Yeah, it does leave you light in terms of what you can change from the bench, but I don't think that really matters too much in a game like this. United need to start well. They need to, we've seen the game can get away from United, and they only, giving City a goal lead. And then trying to make a change is asking for trouble, really, because I don't think United can afford to take chances like that. But that's the catch with Ten Hag at the moment. Is he brave enough to gamble? I don't think that many people are expecting a positive United result. But we give him the benefit of the doubt if he does gamble. It's a tricky one for him.
What do you think, Wayne? Just obviously interested in what your thoughts are in terms of with the manager, like with the way you obviously go every week and watch the team. Do you when you go and you turn up and you're watching the games, do you feel as though you have that sort of perception of how the manager wants to set up and what kind of style of play? Because for me, when I watch, obviously I don't go and watch as much as you do, but when I watch the team, I just see that from one week to the next, we're not sort of setting up any real patterns and everything seems a little bit off the cuff and there's no real sort of, continuity in our play. And that sort of is worrying to me a little bit because, if we're going to be a team that tries to play out from the back and tries to, dominate possession, then, against these teams that we've played so far, your Sheffield Uniteds and your Notts Forests and stuff like that, we're not even doing that against the lesser teams. So, for me, I'm sort of scratching my head. And obviously, football is not just about keeping possession. It's about who scores the most goals and stuff. So it's not all about that. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts in terms of what you feel in terms of, do you think the manager's setting the team up in a certain way and the players just aren't delivering, or do you just think he's trying to sort of be quite, unpredictable and pragmatic maybe?
Yeah, it's a tough one, that. I would say, because I had a little bit of this conversation on Monday's pod, actually. It's pretty much a year exactly to the day when we played Spurs in that game at home, and Ronaldo went off early, but we played magnificently in that game, and we'd had a sticky run of form, and we had a clear identity, a clear style of play, and we were magnificent throughout. Yeah, you're quite right. I don't think we've got that this season. But I do think, then I look at the defence, particularly look at the axis between Martinez and Casemiro, and Casemiro's not been in good form, and when he's not in the side, I still think he's missing when he's not there because of the presence that he brings. But obviously, because he's not been in great form, you ask the question why, and I think it's a player like Casemiro. You don't excuse a player for poor form all the time, but you could say the players around him is definitely a big reason, because they were brought in for a reason, or they're in the side for a reason. They all play particular roles. They play aggressive, pushing football up the pitch. And United are missing those defenders all across the back line. And when they do it, apart from Dalot, who does push up, but apart from that, Lindelof does try. But others are quite happy to sit and even retreat. And that is really contrary to what Ten Hag's trying to do. Now, the point is, like, these other players who've been there before Ten Hag, is, could he have coached them to be better by now? Should we be expecting better after a year and a bit? And we probably are, to be fair. But I do think that maybe that says more about the players, because I'm still inclined to think, well, we've seen that improvement. We've seen an identity. We know that the manager can do it, and we know that some of the players can do it. So we know it's there. But we also, when we're pointing the fingers or when we're looking and thinking, oh, we're not sure about this, it's usually the same kind of players that we were worried about before Ten Hag was in the post. So, I mean, they can only last for so long because football's such a short-term game that results will eventually catch up with you and the excuses run out, even with an injury crisis like United's. And you're quite right. I look at United, I think I'm not seeing what I saw last season, and I think I can excuse some of that because of the injury crisis. And I've been around the block long enough to understand that on a week by week basis. Even if I get frustrated or upset with a result, I can still say, all right, well, the first reason is the injury crisis. And then you look at the thing, well, the injury crisis has been going on for 6-7 weeks. Could we have found better solutions in that time? Or are we just banging our head against a brick wall, which sometimes it seems that we are doing, and that's when the criticism comes on the manager, which we've discussed on here. And he's not immune to it. We'll criticise the manager. We've criticised all the previous managers, even Ole, who we all loved. We've talked about that, and Ten Hag is in that position at the moment. Should he be finding better answers? Should we be expecting better performances, like you said?
Yeah.
It's not really against Manchester City. We will expect that we're going to lose and probably play poorly. But Sheffield United, Copenhagen, could we expect the horror show that we saw against Galatasaray not to happen? Yeah, we should be expecting better with the players that we've got. And I think that is a conundrum. He should be expecting the manager to do better. And I think that's where he's facing the questions at the moment.
I think it's mainly as well, just because a lot of fans will obviously be looking at it and thinking, he's had a year now and there should be, a progression in terms of, with the way that we're playing, regardless of injuries and suspensions and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's had the money to bring in players. He's brought in a lot of these players now who he wanted. We've spent a lot of money. The squad depth is there. Is the squad depth good enough? Okay, maybe not. Which is a massive, part of why there's probably not such a sort of incline in the progression. But again, I'm just more critical of the way that we're actually trying to play on the pitch. I can excuse bad performances and I can excuse sort of a little dip in performance in terms of if there's 2 or 3 injured and it's a disjointed back four or whatever. But I just think now, because some of these players have had so many opportunities and, they have been playing now, I'm still not sort of seeing a level of performance that I would expect from a Manchester United side under this manager who wants to play in a certain way. I would be expecting us to be performing a lot better on a more consistent basis, especially against, as you mentioned, the teams that we've played this season, because I don't think we've played really other than Bayern Munich and maybe a couple of others, any real big tests, apart from, you could maybe say, Tottenham as well, because of the way they've started the season. I think all the rest of the games, we would be looking on paper at saying, we should be dominating this game, not maybe for 90 minutes, but we should be the, more dominant side. We should have a bit more possession. We should be creating a lot more chances. And I just don't think that that's sort of been quite the sort of story of a lot of these games that we've sort of nicked. The Burnley game comes to mind, Sheffield United, Copenhagen, there's a lot more I could probably name, Wolves, Notts Forest. So, there's games where we sort of, could identify as being, on paper, we should be, the best team for 90 minutes, really, but, every team that we've sort of played this season, we've sort of struggled with it in large periods for me.
Yeah, Arsenal's the other one as well.
Sorry.
I think those are the games as well. Though those games, it's funny because you mention them, and you're quite right. In all of those wins, we've probably been outplayed, and in all of the defeats, there's probably moments like Spurs, the penalty, Arsenal, the controversy at the end, and Bayern, the stupidity with the errors, that you think, oh God, and we're only like, I haven't checked the table because it's too depressing, but someone said we're only 6 points from the top. Like, how is that the case? But I mean, that just tells you, first of all, it tells you the state of the league, and second of all, it tells you the narrowness of the margins. It bodes for a very interesting game on Sunday. Like you said, I mean, I'm not very good and I don't like doing predictions on this. I'm not going to put you on the spot with predictions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a forecast. It's different to a prediction if you're listening and watching this. My forecast is, if you look at the season so far and you look at what City have done and you look at what United have done, and I say this, and my expectation is that United are going to get battered off City on Sunday. But if you look at the forecast of the way that they're playing, United will probably, if you looked at the pattern of the season so far, United will be in the game for much more than anyone expects, and they'll let themselves down with an error, and there'll be a refereeing decision that goes against them, and City they'll get an unconvincing win. That's the pattern of the season so far. So that's what you should see on Sunday, even though I expect that City will run away with it. And because, trends have to change sometime. And I hope that when Phil and I are here next week, joined by Lee, hopefully, who couldn't make it tonight for unforeseen circumstances, but I hope that when we are here together next week and we're talking about this game, we're talking about a trend changing, but the other way around. And, like Phil was saying, you need to see a good United result, a performance, and maybe, that surprise from Ten Hag that we haven't seen yet. Maybe we'll see that on Sunday. Thanks to Phil, as always, for his time. If you've been watching live on YouTube, if you can like the video, if you can subscribe if you don't already. Thanks to everyone, by the way. We passed 5,000 subscribers this week. We're only a small channel, but we put in this time every week and bring I think it's the best analysis, like Phil, it's been quality throughout the pod. So if you like that, we're always here every week. So subscribe and like. And if you're listening on the audio podcast as well, if you can subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you listen on, we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, guys. And we'll be back next week.